Hi everybody, this video is sponsored by a contribution from Anonymous, and here's what she wants you to know. Dear Ollie, I first want to say what you're doing is fantastic as far as I can see. Is helping thousands of others like myself. As one of your other subscribers previously said, I hope that you will be speaking to a much larger audience one day because I do believe that this is a problem that is far more common than our society wants to admit. I have watched several of your videos and was led to your website while researching narcissism and borderline personality. I have since had a major aha moment with regards to my upbringing. I decided to write after watching a few of your most recent videos. Some of these hit so close to home that I decided I just needed to get this off my chest. Sorry if this is long, but here it goes. A bit of info about me. I am a 31-year-old woman who is soon to be married to a wonderful man. I know it is a common pattern for people who grew up in my situation to marry a narcissist, but this man is the furthest thing from it. I have recently realized that on a subconscious level, I always knew that something was wrong, which is why I always seemed to seek out people who are the exact opposite of my parents. I am the only child of two narcissistic parents. My mother is a 60-something woman who is still stuck in high school at the popular table. My father is a severe alcoholic who still to this day will not admit he has a problem and blames his unfortunate circumstances on the fact that he was fired from his job in the 80s. My parents divorced when I was 12. While I don't like my mother, the one thing she did do right was kick my father's drunk ass to the curb. I was born in the mid-80s, 5 weeks prematurely. This was my first mistake. I had to stay in the hospital for a couple weeks due to difficulty gaining weight. Ironically, of course, in my later years, it was an issue that I was too fat, but we'll get to that later. The first problem with my being born prematurely was the fact that my mother didn't get to deliver at the hospital she wanted since they didn't have a newborn ICU. She was forced by her doctor to go to the county medical center, which she has basically said in not so many words was too ghetto for her and has complained about all the lowlifes on her floor all at the time. She complained about having a black roommate for a day too. If I had been born the right way and not been early, she would have never have been exposed to that element, you see. Well, that's obviously your fault because you decided to be born 5 weeks prematurely. The level of blame from the narcissist knows no bounds. Being blamed for being 5 weeks early, like you had a decision in that. Due to the minor health issues I experienced as a baby and the way both of my parents seem to exaggerate what happened, I think the two of them have varying degrees of Munchausen syndrome, which is basically telling people you're sick when you're not, to garner sympathy. When done to a child, I believe it's called Munchausen by proxy. Every head cold was a potential pneumonia. Every paper cut was a staph infection due to my extremely weak immune system. My mother started having my cholesterol obsessively tracked at 6 to 7 years old because heart disease runs in the family. Granted, both my grandfathers did have heart disease, but neither of them developed it until they were at least 50. Not in the first fucking grade. Yeah, this is Munchausen's. But like I said, Munchausen's is just a form of narcissism because it's just all Munchausen's is, whether it's the hypochondriac type on yourself or pushing it on your children. It's all, what's the goal of it? The goal is to seek attention, which is what the narcissist always seeks out anyway. Technically, I was supposed to start kindergarten in the fall of 1989, although I still would have been 4.5. My mother held me back a year, part of the reason being my age, which is understandable. But apparently there was also a whole host of other reasons. These reasons, of course, all tied to my premature birth. She was convinced that I had global developmental delays due to being born early, even though my IQ tested as borderline gifted. She then clarified, saying that she wasn't worried about the IQ, that it was my physical clumsiness and what appeared to be social and emotional impairments. Oh, you mean like being a 4.5-year-old? Actually, if you ever to do any research on Asperger's, this is the exact list as always how my mother has described it to a T. I vaguely remember being 5 to 7 years old and being led around to a series of physiological evaluations. She never mentioned Asperger's to me directly, but she was clearly convinced that something was wrong. I'm not even sure if it was a specific diagnosis that she was going for, or if she was just trying to get any label she could. I was never diagnosed with anything, so it appears that the doctors disagreed with her. Immediately after this, she appeared to have let the subject go, but I was wrong, since the entire subject resurfaced again in my early teen years. More on this later. It sounds like, yeah, it sounds like your mother's just trying to have you diagnosed with something. Around the same time, kindergarten and first grade, I was informed that I was chunky and needed to start watching my food. I watched one of your more recent videos made for a woman who mentioned that she was struggling with her weight, and then you had told her that her mother actually wanted her to be fat. I didn't think of this initially, but when I saw that video, I snapped because I realized that is exactly what my mother tried to accomplish with me. Epic fail. I have been at or near my ideal weight for over a decade. She would tell me that I needed to watch my food while at the same time making absolutely no changes to the dinner she was cooking or the snacks she had in the house. In fact, she would often sit with me in front of the TV with a box of cookies or a box of Doritos and then yell at me for finishing the bag. She would actually tell me that my stomach was getting bigger, or that the reason I had a rash on my thighs was from my fat legs rubbing together. She would also point out to me behind their backs how fat my friends were, how much she saw them eat. This was all the while I was still in elementary school. Yeah, this woman was trying to make you fat. She was trying to destroy you from a very early age. So if she wasn't going to make you sick, she was going to make you. I would guess all the weight and food talk started after the doctors refused to diagnose you with anything. So she needed to, so I think she was looking more for a reason to be able to control you. So if you had a medical diagnosis, you wouldn't be able to go out with your friends. You wouldn't be able to do this and you wouldn't be able to do that because you have whatever she was trying to have you diagnosed with. So what's the next best thing to do? Food. Oh, you're fat. Narcissists love to control you by food. And when times like this, or she's saying you're fat, she's trying to make you fat and make you eat. Because then if you get fat, then she can control you and make her excuse why you can't do anything is because you're fat and you overeat. And then you might even be too tired to do anything or too fat to do anything. She was trying to control you. When I was in second grade, my mother got a teaching job in the district where I went to school. She didn't teach any particular grade, but was a reading specialist, which meant that she taught all grades, which meant that whatever school I attended in that district, she was there. You better believe that every test, quiz, and homework assignment was tracked obsessively, and she would sometimes know how well I did on something before even I did due to talking to teachers behind my back. I remember her telling me once how she found out about some quiz that I got a C plus on and then started attacking me, telling me how disorganized I was and that I wasn't with the program. I told her it was just one quiz and I still got a B plus for the quarter. Her response, well, if it wasn't for that 179, you would have gotten an A. I was 9 at the time. As far as being disorganized, this is something that she has attacked me for my entire life, by always telling me what a slob I am and that I couldn't keep on top of my schoolwork because every so often I would get a C plus or a B instead of an A. I think this inconsistency that she has always bashed me for regarding my grades is just part of me being human. but maybe I'm wrong. My GPA was still high enough to make the honor society in high school, but this wasn't even enough for her. More on this later. And what you're seeing here, and I hope you understand what happened. So let's look at this. First, your mother tries to control you through some kind of medical diagnosis. That doesn't go anywhere. Then she tries to control you through your weight and food. And I'm gathering that didn't work either. So how is she going to control you now? She has no medical diagnosis. She can't make you the fat girl she wants you to make. And can't control you that way. So what would be your next progression? Okay, because she can't trust you out by yourself, having a life of your own. So what does she do? She says to herself, how do I figure out a way to spend every waking minute around her so I'm always in her face? I know. I'll get a job at her school and freak her out there and be up her ass there and drive her insane there. And then wait for her to have one test here or one quiz there where there's a minor drop and I can just be on top of her, Because nobody's perfect. Everybody's going to have something. Everybody's going to have something. And it wouldn't have mattered if it was a 79, if it was an 85. The grade would never have been high enough. Because she's going to keep changing tactics until she found the one that worked. That's your mother's MO. She will keep changing tactics till she found the one that worked. At 11 to 12 years old, my body began to change as I grew a lot taller and started becoming wider in the hips. My mother continued to attack my weight as per usual, but then my father also jumped on the weight bandwagon as well. He started to make nasty comments about how much I ate and would actually tell me that I was unattractive. He would make nasty comments about my hair and tell me I had bad skin. I never had more than 2 zits at a time, I don't think ever. He would pick on specific, and I mean very specific things about my body that he thought were unattractive, and then say it was unfortunate because it was just like my mother or someone else in the family that he had been fighting with at the time, usually one of his sisters. Even when I got older, he would notice so much as a 5-pound weight gain or loss and take it upon himself to point it out. This seems a bit unusual for any man, but for a father to pay such close attention to his daughter's figure and appearance is slightly disturbing. It's more than disturbing. It's more than disturbing. And for him to be able to notice that like that, that's not a guy thing to do. That's a female thing to do. Guys typically don't notice 5 to 10 pounds. Gay guys do. Maybe that would explain why he was an alcoholic and why he was so combative towards his daughter. It's either that, if he never got sexually aggressive with you, then it almost seems like a female jealousy thing towards you. Like he resented you for being a woman that he wanted to be. But I could be. As I read on, we'll find out more. And I hope that's it, and I hope there's no sexual abuse in here, but these things sometimes they go that way. Either there's a sick sexual thing going on in his head, or maybe he hates all women. Exactly. But why would he hate all women? There's a difference between being angry at women in general over a divorce and hating your own daughter. And just hating all women. Just hating anything with a vagina. Which it sounds like is the case with your father. He hates anything with a vagina. That's a closeted gay man. Who knows? Not who knows. He's a closeted gay man. Because if there was a sexual thing going, And there's still a possibility of that. But I think you would have said there was sexual abuse by now or something. So I'm telling you, your father is a closeted gay guy. The summer between 6th and 7th grade is when my mother and I moved across town and left my father. I mean, we literally left him. We moved when he was sitting drunk in his recliner chair with no plans of where he was going or what he was doing after that day, despite the fact that he knew for months that we were moving. What it basically had come to was his sisters banding together and having him committed to a psych ward, which is where he belonged since he kept threatening to kill himself that day, knife in hand. I wasn't physically present for this, but this is what he did to my aunts. After a few days in the psych ward, he was then sent to rehab, then to a sober living house. Initially, when my mother and I moved, I was enjoying the peace and quiet of having the psycho out of the house. Little did I know the damage was just beginning. 7th grade was a nightmare, as you might have gathered from what I have written so far. I wasn't exactly part of the popular crowd. I was labeled a freak and a loser, basically for being the introverted side, not particularly athletic, nor a perfect size 0. You would think that as a parent, my mother would have had my back, not in the slightest. She acted like she was the epitome of the perfect mother because she took me to therapy for my social problems at school. She would basically bash me to any therapist we went to right in front of me about my lack of friends, serious issues with food. I was a maximum of 10 pounds overweight by then. And the depression I had, basically because she really had no idea where it came from. Let that one sink in for a minute. No, she knew exactly where it came from. That's why she would go into any therapist and filibuster and control the conversation, say, it's all her, it's all her, it's all her, it's all her. And the therapist should have been like, well, why is she depressed? Why is she apparently overeating? What is it that's bothering her? It's you, bitch. As you can imagine, with everything else going on, I had a bit of a tough time adjusting from 6th to 7th grade, and my grades dropped from A's to gas, a mixture of A's and B's. I later found out that my mother had been talking to my teachers on the phone without me knowing to monitor how I was doing in my classes. When my science teacher happened to call the house when I was home alone one night, this woman basically told me what was going on and even said herself, I don't know why you're doing so well. And believe me, this was not a woman who just gave out random compliments. She was actually kind of a bitch. You better believe it, though, that my mother had all my test grades memorized, as well as homework and lab grades. Well, let me ask you something here. If the teacher is reaching out and then saying, I don't know why you're doing so well because she realizes your mother's a fucking pain in the ass bitch, then why is she playing into it, calling your mother like this at home? Like, at some point, one of your teachers would have had to have come to you and say, you got a problem at home. I actually did have one English teacher my sophomore year who realized my mother was psychotic and said, I realize you have a problem. You should go talk to the school counselor. And I'm like, no. Because back then you thought anybody who went to the school counselor was crazy. But that's the teaching profession, and they kind of just go with the flow because they want their paycheck. But that teacher, if she believed that can't believe you're doing that well with the type of mother you had, she should have said something to somebody, to the principal, to the counselor, brought you in to talk to you in school like, hey, you're all right with this. This is what's going on. None of it. They all just keep their mouths shut and, hope you make it out of their class, give it to the next teacher and the next teacher and keep ignoring the problem, okay, until you're out of the school system, because that's how modern education works. I actually confronted my mother on this recently, and she flat out denies that it happened. I even told her that I knew she was lying since I spoke to that teacher personally. She then told me I was making stuff up in my head, and that was so long ago. What's your point? And that's that's your typical narcissistic contradiction, which is, and if you go back to the summer and you listen to lying narcissist mother lying on phone video I did, it's the same thing. My mother went from I'm making it up into my head, it didn't happen, to what's the difference? Do you see? Like, they all have the same MO. They first lie about it, and then they try to say it's that so long ago, what's the point? Then they try to, invalidate it. They minimize it after the lie. They go with the hard lie first, and then they try to minimize it and never, what did you just say it didn't happen for? And now it happened too long ago. Well, which one is it? Either it happened or it didn't. And we don't even think to call them on that. They get you to argue the next point. Instead of you sticking on like, no, you just said I lied. I made it up in my head. And now you're saying it's so long ago, what's your point? That's basically an admission. We let them lie right to our face and don't call them on it because they change tactics so quickly. It was this particular series of events during this year that led to more neuropsychological evaluations. I remember sitting in the psychiatrist's office with my mother where she was basically rehashing my entire history. Again, going back to the premature birth, insisting that it must have resulted in some sort of neurological impairment due to my lack of social standing. B+ as opposed to A average at the time, less than stellar athletic ability, and severe food issues, which led me to carrying an extra 5 pounds. That's not a typo. The woman just kept giving her looks as if she was the crazy one, which anyone with ears and a brain could figure out. My mother picked up on the fact that the woman wasn't buying it and then switched gears. She then focused less on my social impairments and more on my disorganization, slob tendencies, and my horrible grades. It was almost as if she was trying to get me branded as autistic, and then when that didn't stick, she started to aim for ADHD, lol. It's like she was always determined to get a label, no matter what it was. We never went back to the woman again because, as my mother put it, I don't like her and I don't think she knew what she was talking about. Your mother is determined to get you diagnosed with something. To just over control. It's all she wanted was control. It was around this time that I started to lose weight. I wasn't skinny, but I was pretty firmly out of the chunky category. The mantra was changed at this point. I was no longer told I needed to lose weight. The story then became, being heavy is in the genes. I don't know what you're trying to accomplish with this weight loss. I was told this by several family members, including my mother, both of her sisters, and even my father. I didn't mention it before that throughout my entire adult life, my mother has always outweighed me by 50 to 70 pounds. Am I arrogant in thinking that there was jealousy at play here? Absolutely. No, you're not arrogant. That's exactly what it is. It doesn't matter. Like I said, it doesn't matter what you do. It's going to be a problem. When I was heavy around my family, I got called fat. When I was skinny, that was called, you got to eat. It's too skinny. You're too this. You can't win for losing. And it's all based out of jealousy. It's based out of jealousy. The next year, 8th grade started, and I still wasn't popular, lol. My mother was really disgusted with me at this point, screaming at me over my apparent social retardation and that she didn't know what to do anymore. It's like your mother's a child. Like your mother wanted a best friend, but this is how high school best friends treat each other. Teenage girls are friggin' horrible. They're horrible, horrible people. I mean, I hate to say that because all they want to do is friggin' their friends. They want to just screw over their own friends. I mean, I think it's been like that forever. Teenage girls are horrible, and the problem with narcissistic women is they're basically just teenage girls. And you got a mother here who wants you to be popular for herself, I think, for the attention she get out of it, but at the same time wants to destroy you. I mean, if you ever watch Daria, it sounds like the relationship Daria's sister Quinn had with Sandy, where Sandy's the head of the group and they're all friends, but all she wants to do is sabotage Quinn. But she's her friend, and if Quinn ever tried to leave her, Sandy would freak out. So, but she wants to sit. That's the dynamic you're dealing with here. But you're dealing with that not as a friend the same age. You're dealing with that with a mother who has authority over you, years over you, size over you. It's crazy, and it's a crazy dynamic, and it's the same thing that Charlene went through. She has a mother who's a 13-year-old girl who went from wanting to bully her to wanting to be her best friend. And it's just not, doesn't work that way. Like she had done jack shit in the first place. If I had an issue with a teacher or a classmate, she would either scream at me that she didn't want to hear it, was sick of hearing it when I hadn't complained for months, and almost always took the other person's side before I even got a chance to tell the full story. This was because I was always so this or so that, or I always this or never that. I came home once and I mentioned that I had a really bad day. Her response was, well, the day is over, so I don't know where complaining is going to get you. What do you want me to do about it? One of her favorite things to beat me down over is being too nice, having no confidence, and basically being a weak wallflower. There's so much irony here, I don't even know where to begin. Well, it's all projection. She's talking about herself. Because women with confidence don't do this, don't pick on children. She's just projecting this onto herself. How can you put a kid down 50 times a day and expect them to have natural confidence? Anytime I've attempted to speak my mind in her presence, I was always either screamed at, mocked, or just plain old invalidated, where she actually said, that's not how you feel, that's not how you feel, this is how you feel. That's not what you think, this is what you think. She's always projecting her own tastes and opinions onto me, saying things like, you want this or that. If I agree with something else instead of her, I'm letting that person push me around, and that I need to stick up for myself. Really, I agree with her. This happened a lot recently with my fiance. Stay tuned. This is a teenage girl pack leader mentality. This is exactly how teenage girls interact with each other. They want you to succeed. They don't want you to succeed. It's all contradictions. Watch how teenage girls this is teenage girl stuff. And that's why it's so confusing to you as a child, because it's coming from an adult. It's coming from your mother. When I was 15, my mother bought a house for the two of us. This was a relief, considering that we had moved around to a series of crappy rentals my entire life, and I was happy to finally have a permanent residence in a nice neighborhood. My mother, however, continued the pity party. Let me explain. Around this time, I started asking her questions about why my dad used to be like this before, what my dad used to be like before his drinking got really bad, and why she thought he'd be a good husband. I wasn't being a wise ass. I was just trying to gain some perspective on my clusterfuck family life. The first thing out of her mouth was that he was a hot prospect. He was in a business at the time, and she thought that he had potential to make a lot of money. And that he had what my mother referred to as the basics, meaning well-educated, master's degree, good-looking, well-dressed, from an upper-middle-class neighborhood. Even as a young teenager, this struck me as odd. As you can see, she never thought that her life would be anything other than a rich husband, fancy house, and perfect children who were nothing but a perfect narcissistic extension of herself and her perfect husband. The house that we bought was a renovated beach cottage, which was small but in a nice neighborhood, and had a perfectly decent size for the two of us. It seemed as if she was always complaining about how small our house was, and if anyone she knew from the job saw where we lived, they would be like, "Oh my God, these poor people." Comments like this really started to wear on me after a while, and I began to feel like trailer park trash. She would also complain about money all the time, even when I knew she had enough, and any maintenance that needed to be done around the house, especially if she needed to pay somebody. I always went back to, I don't have a husband, I don't have a husband, I don't have a husband. As badly as my parents' marriage ended, I see a lot more similarities between the two of them than either of them would like to admit. My father came to pick me up once in high school and made the wrong turn on the way to my house. He took a wrong turn down a street with these mini mansions that are worth about $700,000 to $800,000 today. When he picked me up, he told me that he had driven down that street, and if things had turned out the way they were supposed to, that's where I would be right now. Another kick in the ribs. I felt like garbage. This was all during the early part of high school. If you thought my mother was bad before, I remember being about 17 or 18 years old when she really started to step up her game. She got really nasty when I started learning to drive. She didn't like being in the car with me because, according to her, it was not what a mother was supposed to do. She only did it because I don't have a husband. Right, and you were supposed to be your husband. You were supposed to be your friend at that point. When I signed up for driver's ed, the only experience I had was driving around in parking lots because my mother didn't like to let me drive. Naturally, when I started driver's ed, I wasn't great due to the lack of experience. This, though, according to my mother, was not the reason. The reason was apparently that I was a horrible driver due to my severe coordination issues and extreme unawareness of my surroundings. Again, that good old autism and brain damage, remember? She actually tied my apparent bad driving ability to my lack of athletic ability. I told her that she wasn't making any sense, and that if she thinks I'm bad, she should see some of the other people in my school. I also pointed out to her that my friend, not athletic by any means, passed her road test on the first try. She then proceeded to tell me that this girl was more tech savvy than I was. I guess her logic was that car is a machine, and if you are good with computers, you can be a good driver. They'll say anything. They'll say anything. This is a jealous girl. This is a jealous girl. A jealous pack leader. So not only am I not coordinated enough to turn on a blinker and look over my shoulder at the same time, but I can't turn on a computer either. I guess I should be in assisted living. The funny thing about this whole story is at the end of driver's ed, which is only about 8 weeks long, the instructor actually commented that I was his most improved student out of everyone he had that summer. Pretty good considering I only driven in parking lots before that point. I suppose this guy was also clueless about his own field, just like all these psychologists and doctors. I also distinctly remember doing chores around the house where she would yank whatever object was out of my hand and sneer, "Let me do it because you're not good at it." This was even extended to things I would do for myself, such as fixing my own hair. She would often use my intelligence against me by saying things like, "For a smart girl, you should be X," or "For a smart girl, you sure don't fill in the blank." Apparently, I'm just an egghead who is good for academics and suck at everything else. She would also say things like, "If you weren't book smart, you would get lost in your own house," or even, "If you weren't book smart, you would be disabled." It's just a sabotaging mean girl. Speaking of friends, that was another issue. As I mentioned before, I've always been introverted. My mother has never accepted this. On one hand, she would tell me that I never socialized, as if I went through the entire 4 years of high school without talking to a single person. This is bullshit. Then a day later, she would contradict herself and start picking on the friends that I did have behind their back, of course. She would make fun of their weight, general appearance, and even the fact that some of them were involved in band or musical theater. She would stereotype all of us and refer to us as the geeky crowd. This was coming from a woman who was in her 50s at the time. She would also pass judgment on some of them for having hippy-dippy parents. This has continued to this day with my fiance and his family, as well as the girl who is going to be the maid of honor at my wedding. I'm telling you, this is Daria's sister's friend Sandy, is your mother. And if you watch Daria, if you haven't watched Daria, they play it on I think it's the one of the women's networks at OWN. Is it OWN? It might be. DVR Daria, because it's really a great show, and watch the dynamic in that group, and that's what you're dealing with here. You're dealing with a Sandy and Quinn from Daria type of scenario here, but it's your mom. As you can imagine, I wanted to go away to college, and I did for a year. My luck being what it was, I ended up having a miserable year and coming down with a nasty case of mono. The virus had been in my blood since I was a child, and I had occasional flare-ups since. I do admit that stress was probably a major factor, since I ended up picking a school that was a little too competitive for me. As much as I resisted for a while, I ended up moving back home. My mother, of course, used this opportunity for an "I told you so" campaign. Of course, I couldn't handle the competition, and I couldn't even look after my own health. This was just more proof that I was mentally unstable and not as smart as I thought I was. I also distinctly remember her telling me in my senior year in high school that she had doubts about me going away to school, because if you're going to be sitting up there with no friends, complaining all the time and slitting your wrists, I don't know why I should pay for you to go away to school. Keep in mind, this is from a woman who's also criticized me for having low self-esteem, as if it's a personal failure on my part. It was around this time my father was arrested for DUI for the third time and was kicked out of his apartment and started living with his sister. So no improvement there. I transferred schools and ended up getting 2 engineering degrees, even working in a lab through grad school to pay for my master's degree. Before I get too high on myself, let me tell you that is really my mother's accomplishment, since she paid my tuition. Sarcasm. She would also throw this in my face during a completely irrelevant argument that she paid my tuition. Exactly how much she paid each month, and that I am ungrateful. She would also put other women down while putting me down in the process, saying that if so-and-so was your mother, you wouldn't be where you are. About the other women we know. Some of these are even women in her own family. And my mother used to love comparing families too. If this one was your mother, if that one was your mother, it's all projection. I mean, everything about her is projection, projection, projection. It's like hang out with me, be my friend. I hate you. That's how it is. That's how it is with them. After I finished my master's degree, I started working for a local company. My mom was a teacher, so she was home in the summers. While she was home, not a day would go by where I would leave work in the morning and she wouldn't stop me before I walked out the door to criticize something about my appearance. She either didn't like what I was wearing, how my hair looked, or she would tell me that I needed more makeup. She would sometimes take it upon herself to get a brush and start fixing my hair as I was leaving for work. I was in my 20s at this point. I would sometimes start casual conversations with her about something that happened at work, and she would cut me off every time without fail. But you didn't say that to your boss. You can't let so-and-so overhear you say that. Don't let them see you with bad posture like that. Stop saying that. Stop saying like. Stop saying It just didn't stop. She would constantly criticize me for not making enough money, as if it were my fault. Of course, it was because I was too weak and spineless to ask for a raise, as she would say. There were some changes in the company where we got a new CEO and I got a new set of bosses. The CEO, as my luck would have it, was a nasty bitch of a woman, very similar to my mother, as was my other boss at the time. The two of them began to target me like a witch hunt where they would write me up for things I didn't do and bash me in meetings that I wasn't even attending. That's women. That's what it's like working with women. When I told my mother about this, she basically told me I wasn't surprised because I was an easy target. This is apparently because my wallflower personality, in addition to my severe lack of social awareness and everything else that is going on. She then proceeded to tell me that I have underachieved in life. I asked her what specifically she meant by this because I always had been a good student and had 2 engineering degrees. She then told me that, well, we don't know what you could have been. You could have been the cheerleader with the 97 average, referring to my high school, because that's what she wanted. She wanted a pretty cheerleader type. That's what she wanted. She wanted this pretty socialite type and watch you cheering. And then I guarantee you, if you were a cheerleader, she would have given a fuck about your grades. She wouldn't have given a fuck about your grades. This was very confusing since she was using my lack of popularity in high school as an example for an underachieving in life. It has almost been 10 years since I graduated. She then told me that maybe I needed to go on medication because she always knew that something wasn't right with me and that my new bosses were just bringing out a problem that was always there. Here we go again with Operation Find a Label. She would also tell me at the time that my leaving 2 pieces of silverware in the sink overnight was proof of some cognitive impairment and that I needed medication to function. She also brought up the whole 7th grade story as further proof that I was somehow mentally defective. She then attempted to micromanage my work life by insisting on reviewing this employee self-appraisal that I was filling out at the time. I hate to admit it, but my self-esteem was so shot at the time that I actually let her. You let her fill out your performance review for you? She would try to get me to change what I wrote to the point where I was blowing myself up to the level of being obnoxious. I would say to her that I don't want to write that. It's obnoxious, and then she would tell me, well, I guess you just don't care enough. She just wanted you to be her new sugar daddy. She wanted you to be your new sugar daddy friend. That's it. She saw you as an ends to her the means of her life. That's it. When she had to dump your father, then it was on you. If I told her about an issue I had with one of my bosses, she would say things like, you need to email her right now and tell her to fill in the blank. This would be after work hours. If I told her I would do it tomorrow, she would blast me for being too passive. If I didn't want to do it at all, she would tell me, I don't think I've ever steered you wrong. Translation, you can't wipe your own ass without me. She would even say this to me in not so many words, telling me that she was worried about me living on my own because she had doubts about my mental stability, and that the only reason I was even doing as well as I was because I was living with her. And she was sucking you down, man. Within a year of me starting my job, I had broken up with my college boyfriend since he had commitment issues and didn't know what the hell he wanted. It was a 6-year-long relationship that went nowhere. Just let me tell you that if my mother had the choice, this is who she would pick. His family was loaded, and he had a very overbearing father and older brother. In other words, whatever you told him to do, he would do like a trained puppy. I think my mother liked the idea of a potential son-in-law that she could whip and boss around while raising her social status to boot. I tried to make the relationship work, but gave up after a while because it was going nowhere, and as you can guess, I was a little bummed about it. Not too long after my mother and I were decorating a Christmas tree, she pulled out an old ornament given to her by a student in the early 70s. She then said in disgust regarding this particular student, she's probably a grandmother before me. Needless to say, I was pissed. She then just mocked me and told me that I had no sense of humor. It's all about her. Everything about what your mother does is about her. About 2.5 years ago, I met my current fiance. He's one of the easiest people to get along with and a big teddy bear. I have to say I feel somewhat guilty for subjecting him to my mother, even though he seems to handle it well. My mother made a comment once that he is not what she pictured for me, and that she pictured me with somebody more polished. I asked her what she meant by this. Okay. You need to stop asking what she means by this, because every time you ask her what she means by it, it just gets worse. She's proven herself to be a serial asshole. She's a serial asshole. And she sets you up for this every time. And then you go, well, what do you mean by that? And then she just says something again and knocks your block off. I asked her what she meant by this, and if this was about his weight. She said that it was part of it, but she was picturing me with someone who dresses better, speaks better, is better educated. It bothers her tremendously that he has only an associate's degree. This never bothered me once, since he works as a computer engineer and is very successful. She then threw it in my face that my ex was polished, and that she felt bad that I lost out on all that money. I was furious at this point. She also has a lot to say about my fiance's family, and has actually told me that I am marrying down. I remember making a comment once about a tattoo that my future sister-in-law had. My mother's response, and these people are going to be coming to your wedding. What am I going to tell my cousins and my friends? The fact that she was thinking about this before I was even engaged says a lot about her priorities. Yeah, it does. My future mother-in-law is somewhat of a free-spirited old hippie, the polar opposite of my mother. It is obvious that my mother has a problem with this, because she has referred to this woman as a bad mother and not a real mother, and other things like that. I guess if you're not mocking your child and putting them down every 5 minutes, you're not doing your job. This really bothers me, because she is one of the nicest people you ever meet. My mother has already accused me of liking my mother-in-law better than her. My fiance seems to think that my mother has a complex about this, because why else would she say it? Of course she has a complex about it. That is what her control of you has always been about. Don't go out and see somebody better than me. This is the apex of what your mother's been trying to avoid. Okay? An actual loving mother type figure in your life. This is what your mother's been trying to avoid. This loving mother thing. And the money. Because your mother can be bought. Your mother's a complete moral prostitute. And that's really, I think, the moral of this video, of what your mother is. She is a moral and social prostitute. She will just sell out for empty vapidness and money. And her whole goal was to keep you away from a mother figure like your new mother-in-law, or your future mother-in-law. Okay? Because she knows she can never be that. As I'm sure you can imagine, planning a wedding has been a nightmare with my mother. She has yelled at me things like, "This is just as much about me as it is about you. Because I raised you, there are going to be people coming to the wedding from out of town to see me." There have been other gems to such as, "It's my reputation on the line," as if the president were coming, and accidentally slipping and referring to it as her wedding. She also screamed at both of me and my fiance for approximately 3 hours straight for not wanting to be married in a Catholic church. I never felt that connected to Catholic religion as a child, and I feel as if I just sort of went through the motions. My fiance isn't particularly religious either. During that whole screaming match, my mother got in my fiance's face and said, "Do you believe in God? Because if you don't, there's something wrong with you." As it is now, we are going to have the third ceremony and at the reception venue. However, my mother has still said things to me like, if your grandfather was alive, you'd be getting married in a church, as if I was disgracing the family lineage. She also mentioned that another girl that we knew is getting married in a Catholic church. She looked me dead in the eye and said, I wish that was my daughter. So go to her wedding, bitch. I hope you're not going to have this bitch at your wedding, because she's going to do this. She's going to do something to destroy your wedding. You cannot let this woman at your wedding. Or I hope you didn't. About a week went by where she seemed to back off, but then she brought me an old picture, and she had of my father outside the church on their wedding day. Isn't this a nice picture of your father and I outside the church? She said, like a real bride and groom. I couldn't have gotten angry. I could have gotten angry, but I instead just sort of sat there. Sometimes I feel like, what's the point anymore? As far as the wedding planning, my fiance has been very helpful, and he and I both like working on it together. According to my mother, though, this is not how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be the bride and her mother doing all the work, while the groom is supposed to just get the tux and show up. I think this is a crock of shit, and maybe that's just me. I was very involved in my first wedding. The second one was just a justice, but the first one I was very involved in. She tells me that she's never seen a groom with so many opinions, and that I'm letting him boss me around. I told her to take a look in the goddamn mirror. As far as the groom just showing up, I asked her how well that worked out for her marriage. She shut right the fuck up. She likes to pick on my fiance behind his back, of course, about his weight and the problems that she thinks he has at his job that he doesn't actually have. She seems to think that he's going to lose his job because he's lazy. This is because he works in IT and can work remotely. Everything about your mother is jealousy, is jealousy, is jealousy. He also has sleep apnea. While I'm not dismissing that can be serious, my mother seems to keep bringing it up, along with the extra weight. She has yelled at me repeatedly, telling me that I'm going to be a stranded widow in 10 years with 2 kids and no money. She keeps insisting that he will either lose his job, die, or both. It's almost as if she actually wants these things to happen. According to her, though, she screams at me over these things only because she wants the best for me. She wants the best for herself. I always knew there was something slightly off about my mother, but it really didn't hit me until I moved in with my fiance. I had no idea what it was like to live in a peaceful, non-combative environment where I wasn't being berated every 5 minutes. It was shortly after this that old repressed memories of my mother screaming at me started surfacing, and I would freak out if I had left something out from the night before, a silverware, towels, etc. I would get flashbacks and immediate knot in my stomach. I think I may be suffering from PTSD. Of course you're suffering from PTSD. It's a tough thing to do now, 5 months before the wedding, with a lot of mutual relatives coming. But I am seriously considering going no contact after this because I feel she's only going to get worse. My fiance is also worried about this. Anonymous. Do you want her to ruin your wedding? Then let her show up there. Because if you think she's not going to pull all this bullshit on your wedding day, you're fooling yourself. You are absolutely fooling yourself. She won't stop. She can't stop. She can't control it. She can't control it. And the problem is you need to go no contact now. Because what the narrative will be if you try to go no contact after the wedding, right after the wedding, say she's going to go, look at what she did. He brainwashed me. He brainwashed my daughter, or they set me up together to use me at the wedding and then just dump me and the family. And no. Listen, let me give you a little advice about weddings. They're one day, and then it's over. And then you're going to look up and you're going to see all the money you spent on it, and you're going to be like, huh, Could have used that money for a lot better things. I'm not saying don't have a nice wedding, okay? But weigh your options here in regards to what's the damage going to be to you emotionally when she ruins your wedding, when she starts with you on the wedding, when she makes her comments at the wedding, when she has her face on at the wedding, when she starts bossing you around at your own reception at the wedding, when she tries to take over everything at your own wedding. Is that worth it? Is that worth it? Is it worth having that party like that and that whole thing like that for her to ruin it for you? Or would it be better to cut them out right now, let the chips fall where they may, and if you could still have the wedding, if it's not going to be that big of a deal, I don't see how it couldn't be that big of a deal, and still move on without her there, then do it. If it would ruin the whole wedding, you have to ask yourself the question, is it better to cancel? Would it be better to cancel that wedding and do something smaller with the people who are truly in our lives and truly our friends? Or to suck it up and let her ruin your fucking wedding day at the church, or not at the church, I'm sorry, at the ceremony, at the reception hall, up your ass, up your husband, insulting. Is that worth it? And is there any way that that's not going to happen? This woman has not stopped changing tactics from one thing to the next your entire life. And it's all been to keep you under her type of control, to make you into some kind of weird, subservient, under the pack leader type of mean girlfriend, where they're friends, but they're all still fucking jealous of each other, and they really don't want each other to do better than each other, but they'll act like they kind of do, and then sabotage you at the same time. It's back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It's like Real Housewives or Jersey Housewives. Is there any way this woman's not going to cause drama at your wedding? None. I don't see how. I don't see how she wouldn't. You know she will. To the point, if this woman's to the point where she's writing your reviews at work, telling you what to say to your bosses, demanding you, this is not going to end well for you. And this could be a self-inflicted injury because you know it's coming at this point. You know it's coming, and you are setting yourself up for this beautiful day in a dress with a party, and you are setting yourself up for this to be this awesome day, and this woman's going to come in and destroy it on you. And you're, as upset as you're going to be that she did it, you're going to be more upset for you allowing it to happen because you knew this was coming. Of course she's going to try to ruin your wedding day. Of course she is. So my advice to you is, yeah, you need to cut her out. You need to cut out anybody who enables her. You didn't talk much about enabling in your family. I don't know what that's about, but that's fine. You need to cut her out. And you need to do it before the wedding. Because if you wait till after the wedding, you're setting her up to let herself be the victim. And that's the last thing you want to do. Let the chips fall where they may now. Make your stand now. This is the man I love. I'm going to spend the rest of my life with him. We're going to have children together. And you, bitch, are not ruining this. I want you nowhere near it. At least you'll have your self-respect. And let the chips fall where they may. Because you've had enough. It's been long enough. And you can't let this go on anymore. So, thank you for your contribution, and thank you for your story. It was very, very well done. I really appreciate it. I hope this helped. And remember what I said about your father, where his rage is. All women, he hates all women. That's a closeted gay man. So, food for thought. And cut her off now. Thank you to everybody who's watched this long. We're up to an hour, so if you made it through this far, I really appreciate it. Please leave your comments or any advice in the comment section below. And if you want a video or your story read on the channel and you make a contribution to the PayPal link, you get your video up immediately. I get it right out to you. This is Ollie Matthews. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all again soon. Bye.